Just as the seagulls swarm Aberdeen's historic harbour, the attention of policymakers and politics is now concentrating over the future of Scotland's northeast region. Once Europe's energy capital, Aberdeen faces a distinct challenge: a transition away from the historical core of its identity and place in the world for the last 4 decades: oil and gas. As the government advances policies to decarbonize and phase out fossil fuels, many look to the projected losses and repercussions facing the Aberdonian community and wider economy. The energy industry is bracing and preparing for great change, the nature of which remains to be clearly outlined. A recent report projected the North Sea oil and gas industry could lose 400 jobs every fortnight for the next 5 years. For an industry that sustains an estimated 83,000 livelihoods in Scotland, an unclear path forward could prove devastating. While Holyrood and Westminster attempt to navigate the troubled waters ahead, industry leaders and community members are demanding measures to help them stay afloat. It may not look like it to the eye of a tourist, but Aberdeen, the granite city, has gone through a period of uncertainty and turmoil this last decade, without much protection from the rain.
So the Northeast is a fantastic place to live and work, and has been for many, many years, not least because for a long time Aberdeen, the Northeast, was known as the capital of oil and gas throughout Europe. However, there's no doubt that particularly in the last decade or so, there have been a lot of challenges, particularly for the oil and gas industry. And let's be clear, that has been policy driven from particularly the Scottish government, but it has a massive impact on the people of the Northeast, the industry of the Northeast, and the future of the Northeast. And that's something that certainly I concern myself with very much, and my fellow Scottish Conservatives get very worked up about in Holyrood, to try and really turn the government back to focus outside the Central Belt and on the Northeast where it needs to be.
Being the economic driver for the region, oil and gas's decline has left visible scars on Aberdeen.
The challenges that the oil and gas industry particularly has faced over the last few years have a huge knock-on impact. It's not just the jobs of the people in the oil and gas industry. There are something like 200,000 jobs connected to the oil and gas industry, so not necessarily direct jobs, but the indirect jobs, 200,000. And the result, therefore, of challenges to the oil and gas industry impacts on the hotels, it impacts on the taxi trade, it impacts on the transport industry. So every single aspect of life in the Northeast is touched by the oil and gas industry and the challenges it's facing. You know, people are coming here from all over the world, which is wonderful. They bring their families, they bring their kids. The kids are going to school here, so they're using public services, and rightly so. But if people are struggling because of the challenges of the oil and gas industry, the independent schools are also struggling because these people can't afford to put their kids there anymore. It's things like that. Every aspect of life in Aberdeen and the Northeast is touched by a challenged oil and gas industry.
The challenges to Aberdeen have been felt throughout the city's many sectors, including hospitality. Just off Union Street sits 99 Bar, a longtime institution for the local scene, recently reopened in March after the former ownership group had decided to slide the keys under the door. Martin Farmer, now co-owner of the venue, recognized the impact oil and gas has had on city life.
The oil and gas has been the industry, the focus of Aberdeen, God, as long as I've ever known it, you know. So, you know, when the recession hit and people were made redundant, obviously the city was quieter. 10, 15 years ago, there was so many corporate nights out. Like every Thursday was like a Friday night, and every Friday was like a Saturday, and every Saturday was like an enhanced Saturday. Like it didn't matter what week in the month it was always extremely busy. So, you know, now that's not so prevalent and it's quieter, you know, in the industry, the bars, I wouldn't say suffer, but have to react to that. Less staff working, less people out, that kind of thing is going on, I would say.
However, he doesn't think the incoming transition will throw them any more curveballs than they've already faced.
I don't think it's going to get any quieter. I hope. I think you have to be clever. You know, you have to have a really good knowledge and understanding of your finances. Where is your money going? Why are we spending that on X? Do we need to do? So we're very clever the way we do things. We are on our P&Ls every week. You know, we've got Gomez, who is one of the owners. He's amazing with stuff like that. So he focuses on that. You know, keeps me in check because I love to spend money. So it will affect, but I don't think we're getting any quieter.
Businesses on Union Street are facing a combo with energy sector's issues and a prolonged renovation of the city center. A stroll through the city center reveals dozens and dozens of for sale or to let signs for business fronts in what was once the city's vital hub for life.
There are challenges that Union Street faces, which, yes, they are connected to the issues the oil and gas industry has, but they are also about wider political decisions made, particularly by the SNP government in Edinburgh, but also by the SNP Council.
Farmer is still unsure of the impact of Union Street on his reopened business.
I don't know. You know, it's hard because they've been working on Union Street for a long time, you know, and COVID was there, and when COVID was there, the street was closed. So, you know, we've been sitting on a COVID hangover for 5 years or so. So it's hard to really work out what's disrupting Aberdeen in terms of like the hospitality scene, you know, from the city centre. I think if you're doing something right, people will come. If you're not proactive, people don't know about your venue. You know, we've got to be out there, we've got to be putting out the best food we possibly can, putting out the best cocktails, best pint, everything that we do has got to be on point. And it's a work in progress. You know, I do think the staff are so amazing. We're very lucky to have so many great staff, and that helps. So the city is harder, but just we try and do our things the best we can, and therefore we reap the benefits.
But the city is obviously experiencing turmoil. Up and down Aberdeen's historic high street, to let or to sale signs hover over empty business fronts like a plague. So what would happen if the transition and decline of business in the harbour left Aberdeen without its principal economic production? At Robert Gordon University, the Energy Transition Institute has become a leading entity in the study of the North Sea's energy sector and has determined projections for its future in relation to the current policies in place.
So oil and gas decline is nothing new. If you look at the United Kingdom, we have seen decline for 25 years, a quarter of a century decline. We're actually very good at managing decline. Peak production was in 1999-2000, 4.5 million barrels a day. Last year it was 1 million barrels a day, so 75% down. But it's now the shape of decline we see happening, and particularly the investor confidence in the oil and gas industry is disappearing. People don't want to invest, they feel there's better ways and better places to go. And that will actually accelerate the decline of the North Sea quite dramatically. So we see quite an exposure that if we don't see continued activity, the supply chain will disappear and the workforce will disappear. And why is that important? Because the supply chain and the workforce are ideally positioned to do the new renewables activity. There's a huge overlap between what oil and gas is doing and what is happening in carbon capture and storage, what's happening in hydrogen, and also what's happening in new offshore wind. So we want to take that capability from one sector and apply it to somewhere else. But again, that's only going to work if the people are ready, the supply chain are ready, the activity is ready, the investment is ready. At the moment, there's a misalignment. Oil and gas declining faster than renewables is being ready, and we need to find a way to bridge that gap.
Away from the harbour, the Net Zero Technology Centre serves as a bridge between the public and private entities of the energy sector. Working with partners and organizations domestically as well as internationally, The centre is at the vanguard of the transition into the energy sources of the future. They think the new challenge is an incredible opportunity for jobs in the UK.
Absolutely. If you look at the oil and gas industry today, employment stands at roughly 180,000 from memory. And if you look at the jobs needed to get to net zero, we could greatly increase our security of supply by increasing the amount of domestic production in the overall energy mix. But to do that, we need hundreds of thousands of jobs across both capital projects and the operational projects that follow. So absolutely, the opportunity is there to increase the workforce and also at the same time increase our security of supply as a country.
But the Energy Transition Institute's latest study from June suggests the country is facing a choice about the way it will go about this challenge.
So the report we put out, the most recent one, is called Striking the Balance, and the title is really important because what we outline is to get to a greener and cleaner and a net zero future. We have a choice. We can actually go full industrial strategy on the existing energies, maintaining what we have and building the new renewables energies. We end up with 40% more jobs, a really good outcome for the UK. We also looked at other scenarios where we let industries decline, particularly oil and gas, and we don't see the same speed happening in the renewables industry, in offshore wind, carbon capture, storage and hydrogen. And then we see actually we lose the supply chain, the workforce, and we see the whole workforce decline by 20%. So there's a real big price, 40% upside, 20% downside, and that's what the report's about. If we strike the balance, we can get a real good outcome for the UK. More jobs, better supply chain activity, a greener future and more renewables faster, and get to net zero a lot quicker, which helps the climate. So there's a winning outcome, and that's what our report is about.
Looming like seagulls waiting to steal your food, the prospect of a major shakeup in the energy sector suggests redundancies and instability for the industry. Tulloch thinks there are ways to keep Aberdeen's harbour from running dry.
There's a challenge and an opportunity. The opportunity is that there's huge transferability of skills from oil and gas into renewables, carbon capture and storage and hydrogen. I think the figures say roughly 90% of jobs that exist today are transferable into these growth industries of the future. We're quite fortunate in the UK. We've got the Climate Change Committee, which is an independent body set up by government, but they're independent and they provide advice to the UK government and the devolved administrations on what we need to do to achieve net zero. So that advice is evolving continuously. The 7th carbon budget was published a few months ago. And that shows quite clearly that we need to electrify everything that we can, and we need to use hydrogen where it makes sense to use it, and then we need to store carbon to get to net zero. So all three of those sectors offer huge growth opportunity for the energy sector. The energy sector has continuously evolved over the last 4 or 5 decades, and the key thing over the next 5 years is to make sure that we coordinate the decline, the managed decline in hydrocarbon production with the managed acceleration of jobs across these growth industries.
The measures prioritised by the Scottish Government in the coming years will have a huge impact on the work Tulloch mentioned. For Delu, there needs to be special attention in building policies that specifically prune regions like the Northeast and retain and develop jobs here at home.
So the energy industry is hugely important to Scotland. If you look how many people live here, how many people work here, roughly 1 in 30 people in Scotland who work in Scotland work or support the offshore energy industry. If you look at the northeast of Scotland, Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, it's 1 in 6. So this industry is hugely important to the economy of Scotland. And if you look point forward, we see actually the risk of losing quite a lot of jobs in oil and gas. But the new renewables activity is not all happening in Scotland. Actually, most of the new wind activity is happening outside Scotland for the next 5 or 6 years. So we see happening one industry going down, the jobs not being here, and people, if they want to work there, forced to either commute or move to a new location. So what we think is really important from a just and fair and a managed transition for Scotland is actually match that up and saying is actually how do we make sure we find the right bridge so we keep existing activity going, but also accelerate the renewables agenda faster so we can transfer the workforce, the supply chain, the capacity and capability of the ecosystem to kind of get the new activity off the ground faster. So a good energy policy for Scotland is key. A good workforce plan is key, a good investment plan is key. Combine that, you get a winning outcome and more jobs. Unfortunately, that's not where we are yet, so there's more work to be done.
From a technological and infrastructural standpoint, the transition will bear a cost, but the benefits seem to outweigh them for consumers as much as the nation.
I think one of the issues that's going to be really important is actually the cost of transition. So yes, there is a cost to build the infrastructure, but if you look at analysis from the Climate Change Committee, it actually shows the cost to the consumer is less as we transition than it would be if we were totally reliant on fossil fuels. Plus, you've then got the reduced reliance on imported energy in the UK. And the big one I think is often forgotten about is the export opportunity. So I did mention that work we're doing, looking at the potential to export to Europe and to work together with European partners, but also that imperative to help the global south and the world decarbonise. So that's probably the key message, is that this is an international opportunity, this is a time-limited opportunity, and there's a real imperative, a moral imperative for the UK to play a leading role in this sector.
But for the transition to fly, oil and gas will still be needed.
Again, it's great having the Climate Change Committee providing robust independent guidance. So even in a net zero UK in 2050, we still need roughly 100 terawatt hours of gas and 100 terawatt hours of oil in our energy system. Even if we produce all that we can from the North Sea, we'll struggle to meet 50% of those two demands, and we'll be reliant on imports. So we feel quite strongly that there's a moral imperative and an economic imperative to maintain production as much as possible from domestic sources, to ensure that that workforce is retained and is able to transition into the growth industries of the future.
But there is a feeling here in Aberdeen that the transition could play a bigger role in reviving the northeast of Scotland, which many view as a massive development opportunity.
This is a fantastic place to live. I should know, I came here 20 odd years ago for 1 year, and I'm still here. This is genuinely the best place, I think, in the country to live. And I think it will be again.
Pragmatism seems to be the key sentiment here in the Northeast. Throughout the region, there is a sense good leadership and policy making will be a key factor in the success of the transition. Back at Robert Gordon University, it seems to be the most important factor in reaching net zero and uplifting Scotland to what it could be.
Yeah, I think it's really clear that as any country needs to look at when you want to get to net zero. We need to get it as a world as fast as possible. If you look what's happening on the climate, you see the kind of how fast the world is heating up. This is an emergency. We need to go after it. But we also need to be realistic. It's doable. We need to carry the communities with us, the people with it. We need to make sure the investment is in place. So it is about striking the balance again. We need to find a pragmatic way to make it work. Now, realistic plans need to be in place because, of course, investment drives activity and activity drives people. We need to make sure that the investment goes in the first place. At the moment, we don't see enough investment going in to justify to get to net zero potentially by 2045 in Scotland, and it's also going to be challenging to get there by 2050 in the UK.
Looking forward and away from oil and gas, Tulloch says the technological side of the energy sector has great confidence and hope for what can be achieved.
So there's actually quite a positive mood amongst the technology community, and we see huge opportunity. Yes, it's going to be a complex challenge, it's going to be quite a time-consuming challenge, but we do have the skill set and the infrastructure in industry at the moment that can play a pivotal role as we transition.
Back at 99, and in hospitality here in general, incoming change may not be a huge strain on business, but there is a sense that there should be the same level of attention to industries connected to oil and gas's well-being.
Usually hospitality is one of the fifth biggest sector in the UK, I think. So we're massive, and there's so many people are employed by chains, which have their place, and independents. So, if we don't have hospitality, where are these people working? And so we need to support everyone at the same time.
As the government continues to implement policies and allocate funds to further transition work, local leaders are hoping there can be more encapsulating measures that can support the energy sector all the way down to the independent and induced industries reliant on regional development.
There's so much to celebrate, But we do need, particularly the SNP government, to actually take a look beyond the Central Belt, look up here, and give us the help we need.
The message up here in Aberdeen is pretty simple.
All support is welcomed.
As the city undertakes its own revival and redevelopment in places like Union Street, or right here on Ship Row, once the major economic hub of the city, onlookers patiently await for the future of the energy sector and what it would mean for Aberdeen and the entire region.